All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Waters. I'm an account executive here at Bales and Associates. Thank you for joining our informative Friday session. Before we get started, and if you're not familiar with Bales, I'd like to take a second to tell you a little bit about us. We have been in the Infor ecosystem for over 26 years. We are entirely Infor focused. We do nothing but Infor implementations, upgrades, and managed services. We support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, and Cloud Suite, including HCM, finance, and supply chain. In fact, we've been recognized and given partner awards in 8 out of the last 10 years. Our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in this space and the equivalent in professional experience. Some are former benefit managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. Exciting news for the Infor community. Early this year, Bales became part of Nordic, an industry-leading healthcare consulting firm. We'll operate as a wholly owned subsidiary and continue to be led by Jamie Bales. Nordic will provide us with resources to fund our growth, expand our business, support our customers more flexibly. For healthcare customers, it allows us to bring together the Nordic's capabilities in the EHR space to provide a more holistic solution, including specific expertise in EHR and ERP integration. This combination will offer best practice model to reduce implementation risk and leveraging the data from both systems to drive insights and outcomes. Again, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Let me introduce your presenters. Today, we have Richard Williams, a supply chain principal consultant, and I believe Kacie Burge, our supply chain manager, is on. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Have a good day.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Williams, and the first thing I'm going to do is present our disclaimer. And the reason why we're presenting this is because the information we're going to share today is based on our experiences and our business practices when we go in to provide assistance in implementing the Cloud Suite applications like finance and supply chain. So if you have questions about what you're seeing today, then it is highly recommended that you contact us at Bales and Associates, and we can clarify anything that you may have questions about, and especially related to the presentation today. And let me introduce us. As Brian said, I'm Richard Williams. I am a supply chain consultant. I have been working with the software since version 7, and I actually started out as an installer and knew absolutely nothing about the functionality of the software. And over the years, I have picked up and found my way to the supply chain side of the application, and that's where I'm happiest doing it. I really involve myself in some of the technical components such as Punchout, EDI, mobile supply chain, and a lot of inventory management in general. And today I'm going to be joined by Kacie Burge, who is our supply chain practice manager and all around good person. And she's on the call to make sure that I stay in my lane. So thank you very much for joining us today, and let's get started. Here's the agenda that I'm going to follow today. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of Punchout, vendor prerequisites, application configuration, which are slides. We'll go over the forms that are needed to configure correctly so that we can punch out correctly. And we're also going to have a demonstration of Punchout configuration and use. And we'll be using the Bales demo environment. And we'll be setting up a Punchout vendor there. And we'll punch out, grab a couple of items, bring it back in, and demonstrate its use, sort of real time, if you will. So the benefits of Punchout is a B2B integration with supply chain. When I say integration, a lot of the customers that we see within their ERP systems, instead of punching out from their ERP, what they're forced to do is go to another URL. They enter what they want, they buy items, what have you. They fill their shopping cart and they check out. The issue with that is it isn't reflected within FSCM. So what happens is when we integrate it, we create a requisition within FSM. We punch out to the vendor site. We bring back items from that. We can release the requisition. Most of these items that come back in are denoted as special items. So you may have a rec approval IPA that you want to run this through. Approve it before you buy it. A lot of times in your negotiation with the vendor, they will offer savings on the items that you order. It also, the catalogs often boost productivity, and not necessarily on your side, but also on the vendor side. So it's sort of a win-win. It streamlines the shopping experience in the sense that once you create the requisition header, you punch out, you grab your items, you bring them back in, and it's all integrated right there within your CloudSuite FSM system. It also offers you a way to get cleaner, more complete data on that. You don't have to worry about, well, is this the right UOM? Is this, am I ordering this correctly? It's the data that's returned in the payload from that vendor is up to date, almost real time, as far as pricing and UOM are concerned. There's several other aspects that make this data complete as well. The best part about it is there's very little to no maintenance on the organization side because all of that is done at the vendor side. So the vendor prerequisites, what you'll have to do is enter an agreement with your organization and your vendors. Now, if you've already gone ahead and like I said earlier in the presentation, you go to that vendor's website and order your items on the vendor's website and not out of FSM, chances are you already have a catalog set up, a list of items, a shopping list, if you will, of items that you buy. A lot of times when you enter this agreement, they can take that shopping list and make it available to you. So when you punch out, you'll see the same shopping list that you saw when you went to their site. You can also define what items are going to be included in that catalog. If you have a shopping list, it's perfect because it just brings all of that over. If you don't, you and your vendor can decide on what items you're going to present. You can define what the requesters are allowed to purchase from the catalogs as well. And there are some what Infor calls extrinsics, and we're going to take a look at those in a few moments here. The last but not least, you can choose a delivery method for your purchase order. Now, what I mean by choosing a delivery method, if you're familiar with FSM purchase orders, the issue method can be set to EDI, fax, email. If you choose to use the vendor supplied XML to transmit your purchase orders to them, you can do it through this process easily. So in the application configuration, if you're in an S3 environment, under where it says S3 World, this is how we used to set up your Punchout vendors. You physically had to go into the RQC config.xml file, and for every vendor that you wanted to punch out to, you had to add all that code that you see there under S3 World. And of course, it was fraught. You could fat finger something, transpose characters, put a space in there where you didn't mean to, and it was a little bit difficult to troubleshoot. On the FSM side, in the CloudSuite version, basically what Infor has done is integrated it all. So instead of have to physically enter this in a file somewhere, it's now on forms and it's integrated totally within FSM. Today's demonstration, I'm going to be using the settings from the S3 world that you see here. This is what Lawson used to provide, Infor used to provide for testing your Punchout. It's a Punchout to Dell computers. And this was a testing site, and we can also use it over in the Cloud Suite side as well. Now this, and I'll have to sort of qualify this, testing the application, this is not a Bales or an Infor application. What I do, in my experience, I found a CXML simulator so that I can go in here and I can put all the settings that are necessary to configure Punchout, and I can hit the bottom here where it says test CXML, and if it comes back with a response, you know that your settings are correct. If I had fat fingered or put a space where it didn't belong in that Punchout URL, of course I would get the infamous 404 error, the not found, and I know I had something wrong in there. So I used to use this tool, still do, to make sure my settings are correct, and then I can touch that site. Once I do this, I know how I'm going to set up Punchout in the application itself. Now, granted, you could go in and put all these into the application and try to do a Punchout. If you get an error, you have to go back into it. You have to manipulate it again, try to punch out again. In my experience, I just found the CRP simulator to be a better tool for troubleshooting that. And there are several on the market. You can open up a browser and use your favorite search tool, whether it be Google or Bing or what have you, and find these emulators that are suitable for the need. You can also see the CXML that's generated, and this is actually payload data that would be going to Dell computer should we choose to use the PO dispatcher. So my experience is the first thing I do when I get in here to start configuring it is I find a vendor record. Now, if you'll notice the green circle with DEL, that is the default from Infor. But if you click on that and say browse, it will allow you to upload a PNG or a JPEG file indicative of that vendor. And we're going to see how that works here shortly. The first thing we do is set up a buying organization. Typically, our cases are the company number is 100, your buying organization is 100, whatever makes sense for your organization. So we can set all companies to basic user settings or set all companies to power user settings. And I would not recommend power using settings. I think I would recommend the basic user settings unless you have an administrator or power users that you can trust. You can also prevent RSS option updates here as well. During the buying, another page on the buying organization is the Punchout options. And here's where we're going to define DUNS numbers, our email domain, the sender information. Towards the bottom, we can allow combined items on a requisition, and we can also allow multiple Punchout vendors. My experience is I've never seen anyone who allowed multiple Punchout vendors. They typically say, all right, you're going to punch out to one site, you're going to create a requisition and submit it for that one Punchout vendor. Next, we're going to create vendor categories. And what this does is sort of segregate your vendors. So for instance, you might have IT supply vendors that you would put Dell or HP or Lenovo. When those vendors are defined, we put them in this group. You may have a vendor category that says medical supply vendors, and they would be, of course, indicative of your McKesson, Medline, the healthcare suppliers. Now, if you'll notice the little circle with the Dell right under the blue bar at the top, that's the JPEG that we get uploaded. So in here, we're going to define our Punchout vendor. And we give it the name of the vendor. Down in the from and the to organization, are the settings for your organization, your sender information, and the organization that you're punching out to, in this case Dell, their DUNS number, a network ID if they ask for it. But again, those variables, if you will, are, are supplied in the agreement between you and your vendor. Now, towards the bottom, you'll see deployment information. We have punch in and we have enhanced punch out setup request. Now, what punch in does, when you punch out to a particular vendor and it returns items to Infor, they're always considered special items. If you provide data for some of your items, or all of them if you wish, to your vendor, they can return certain pieces of information that your system will view as an inventory item. So for instance, if I were to select punch in here, there would be data in the payload coming back from Dell that would match up to something that you might have in inventory or a non-stock, and it would treat it as an inventory item. Now the enhanced punch-out setup request, there's three fields primarily: the requesting location, the requester, and another piece of data that you can set up in here, which they classify it as extrinsics. And what it will do is, in the payload of data that you send over to Dell, it will include all of that data, the requester, requesting location, in that payload of data. So here we have field mapping, and this is mapping coming back from the vendor. So they will tell you in that payload of data, we're going to send you a field called deliver to. And what you can do is map it to the requisition line deliver to within the process that you're working in, and should go directly onto the requisition itself. Data that we send over, Dell may say, hey, we want to know what your organization name is. Put that value in this field. So whatever hospital or whatever your organization name is, you can pass that data right along in that payload of information that you're sending to Dell. This is the requester's punch-out vendors. We have to assign the vendor to each requester or they won't see it. It's not global. Once you set up the vendor as punch-out, yes, it's there, but not everyone sees it. You have to tie it to your requester. And then again here, the field name, organization, and the field value, your hospital here. More punch-out vendors data. So for instance, if you have a particular catalog, in the field name, Dell may say, all right, we have a field called use catalog, and we want a value for that. What is it you're looking for? So what we do is the field value IT. And again, this is included in the punch out data that goes over. It could determine what catalog they're going to present to you. Here is how we're going to tie that vendor, Dell, to each individual requester. So we add a record, we're going to say, okay, for Richard Williams, you can see Dell. This is if you choose to use XML as your delivery method to your vendor. You set up the parameters on this form, and then within the Lawson application, when you specify XML on the vendor's record, and then when you want to physically transmit this to Dell, you run it through a dispatch PO routine that is inbuilt within FSM. It delivers it behind the scenes, much like an EDI will, or an email for that matter. So, if you'll bear with me a second, we are going to get into the Bell's demo environment and see how this works. This is my dashboard. I prefer to use these contexts over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use controller because I know it can access the vendor's record. So in here, I'm going to look up Dell, and there is our vendor record. I merely come in here, I punch on this, and I say browse. And when I browse, it's going to allow me to go to wherever my desktop is here. And my punch out images. And there's my image for Dell. And I will open that up. Notice how it populates this. Now it may be here or there, but it's a little bit of eye candy, so it stands out as far as your punch out vendor is concerned. So now we have that set up. So what we're going to do now is come over, and I'm going to go under Supply Management Administrator. Yes, save that change. And it's uploaded that. Down here, we see punch out in here. Here's our buying organization. We already have it set up in this environment. Here are the punch out vendors that we've established in our environment here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add one more. We're going to come in here. We are going to search for Dell, which is right here. We're going to say, okay, you give it a name. There's no purchase from location. Vendor category, here is what is set up as categories within our demo environment. We have office supply vendors, medical supply vendors, maintenance supply vendors, and IT supply vendors. We'll click there. We've added that. We don't have to give it a description. Now here's settings that we'll have to populate. Depending on what your agreement is in here, not all of these fields may need populated. They may tell you, just send us our DUNS number, hit this URL with a shared secret password, and that's good. That's all we want. Others will say, we want network IDs, we want all this other data that to ensure that when you punch out to them, that they're talking to the right organization and you have the right vendor as well. So we're just going to some of this data may seem redundant to you, but it's the way the payload is built for the information you want to send to Dell. In our shared secret or password in here. And again, these settings come right from the info documentation in here. In our URL, earlier in our conversation where we had punch in, where it treats it like an inventory item, or the enhanced punch out setup request, this is where you would specify those pieces of information. So this is a pretty generic punch out vendor that we're going to set up today. So we're just going to go ahead and save this off. And we have our punch out vendor created. Yep, we've got the categories, field mapping. We don't have any vendors field mapping in here, but if you wanted to add it, you'd merely click. The from field may be deliver to, it's an extrinsic to field, and there should be a requisition line deliver to here. I won't be saving that. Here again, vendors data. We click on here. They may tell us a field name to use. This is where we had the organization, and you would give it your facility name, like such, and you, of course, populate the vendor, and then save this one off. Again, today we won't be doing that. Now we're going in here, and we're going to add, as you can see, I've been added to McKesson Medical Surgical and Office Depot. So what I want to do now is come in here. My requester, I believe, is 14. It is. And the vendor is Dell Computer. And the punch-out vendor is going to be this record right here. Because you have the vendor and you have the punch-out vendor. One thing to note about the punch-out vendor right here, this number 4, if I were to delete Dell Computer out of here, it won't reuse this number. If I were to delete it and come back in and add it back in, this number would increment by 1. So what it's really showing us here is that I've added and deleted this thing 3 times already, and this is my 4th attempt to add. And then we'll save this information off. So over here is the requester punch out vendor data. And I'll show you how this works. Let's say Dell says, send us your user email so that we can send you an email to confirm your shipment. So what you can do is if they say, we're putting it in this particular field, user email, then you can come over here and just merely specify your email address. And we will save that off. Oh, yes, I guess that's required. Let's save this off. Like what fat finger? I apologize. I'm getting ahead of myself. We've saved that off. Now, if I come down here, you can see I've been added to Dell Computers as my punch-out vendor here. Now, the purchase order dispatch record here, this is if you generate your purchase order as an XML and you want to transmit that behind the scenes, much like you do EDI or email, and you run the dispatch PO job, it will use these settings to create an envelope around your transaction. And without you even knowing it, it'll make an HTTPS post and send it to your vendor in here. A lot of this information we've already established earlier. You would just have to establish it again, but this time give it a post to server and a deployment node of either production or test. So let's see if it works. I am going to go in under Requester here. Excuse me, I'm going in under Requisition Self-Service. Sorry. If we look down here, we can see that Dell is available for me to order from. So I can come in here and click Profile. I'm going to give it my requesting location. And let's say I just say I want to send it to the Heart Center. My delivery date. Let's say I want it on the 6th. You can include a deliver to on here. You don't really have to include a vendor on here. When you punch out, that information will return. And our buyer, we're going to let Miss Kacie Burge be our buyer today. And our distributions accounts are set up correctly. So what we're going to do now is merely create a request. And then our request has been added. So now what we're going to do is say add to request. We'll go to shop Punchout vendors. And let's see if I've set it up correctly. And here we are. Now we are outside of the Infor FSM application right now. So let's say I want to shop. Standard configurations. I don't know what's going on with this. We can come over here and let's just say we want to look at computers. I'm not sure why it's not bringing up computers on here. But what we'll do is we'll say, all right, I want this item. So we click on it and we'll add to cart. We see here's our shopping cart thus far. We can continue shopping. Let's see if we can get us a monitor. And we'll select this one. And we'll add it to our cart. Now we'll proceed to our cart. And we'll create our order requisition. And then we continue securely. And we'll submit our order. And here's our order of the products we wanted. It's come back into Infor at this point on a requisition. And we'll merely hit submit, yes. And it tells us our request 243 is processed. And we'll get out of this. And we will refresh this. And I apologize, it looks like it's taking a while. Let's see, come back in this one. Yes, and here's our request 243, and it's been processed. So it is out here waiting to be created into a purchase order. So we'll close out of this. And what we want to do first is to check to make sure that vendor information here. And we look for Dell. Excuse me a minute. Should be looking to see what I'm trying to find here is our issue method. And Kacie, are you on the call? Well, once we
Hey,
find
sorry.
our,
Can you hear me? Sorry,
yeah, I can
double
hear you. That's
muted.
okay. I'm sorry.
Double muted. What's up?
Where you had answered this for me, the vendor information for Dell. I want to set the.
Yeah. So you are on the AP side of the vendor. So click View Vendor right from here, actually, right where it says View Vendor. If you've got Dell open, over to the right of your screen.
Oh, right here.
Over to the right, just a little bit more.
Oh, I see.
Right there.
Yep. Sorry.
No problem. No, that's okay. And then halfway down the page, there's a blue hyperlink that says View or Update Purchasing Details. This will hop us over to the purchasing side of this vendor.
Oh, I see.
And there you go.
There it is. Okay. Thank you, Kacie. I lost my way. So if we take that payload of data and turn it into a PO, and through normal processing going from rec to PO to the issue method of XML, it will generate an XML file. And then if we come up here and we look at the to dispatch. There it is. And what we can do is we can say our company. I believe we were 100, which we were in here, and just say okay. And then we can either schedule this job to send our purchase orders to the vendor behind the scenes, or we could submit this right now, real time. I'm going to cancel this because we didn't set up any data, and I think Jamie Bales would be angry with me if I ordered anything without her knowing about it. So I'm going to come back to our PowerPoint presentation. And now I'm going to open it up for any questions or answers. Or questions and answers, I should say.
No questions in the chat right now.
Okay, so we'll just move right along here.
Oh, we just got one.
Okay, yeah, I saw that. What was the question?
How did you size the Dell logo to upload it?
How did I size it? It's, and please, you're probably going to laugh. What I did is I found an image that for Dell that was out in the public domain. So I downloaded it, and when I downloaded it, it came in as, I can't remember, it was a JPEG or a PNG file. And here's the funny part. I just went ahead and opened it up using good old Paint. And I sized it in Paint because it allowed me, they have a resize option in there. And I sized it to what I thought would fit in that image. And that's basically how I did it.
All right, Molly, looks like that's all the questions.
Yep.
Okay.
And the follow-up question was, and what was that size that you used in Paint?
What size was it? Let me see if I can bring that up right quick. Oh, it's right here, actually. Yeah. I'm on it on my desktop. Punch out images. Dell. I want to edit this with Paint. Let's see what Paint 3D says. And see if it'll allow me. I don't know if this answers your question, but this is basically how I sized it. And I hope that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, the comment was just that they've tried multiple times to size the logo and it never fits correctly. So
Oh, and it never fits correctly?
yeah.
Okay, well, all right, let me do it this way right quick. Close out of here. And I'm just going to go into good old Paint here. And let me open that file. There. And then what I did was just merely resize it. And because it was much larger, and I would agree with whoever posed the question, and I just resized it using horizontal. So if I were to come in here and I would say, let's resize it to 50% of its size. And for lack of a better way of explaining it, I just played with it till I got it to a small enough size.
And he says, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Molly. So I think that wraps up today's session. And as a note, this was the last one of our July Informative Friday series. We will be continuing it back up in October. And just as a second note, we do have a coffee with consultings offering. So if you have any questions or concerns with anything related to Infor, we will offer a half-hour time with one of our consultants. So if that would interest you in any way, just reach out to us at our website, or you can reach out to Molly Velasco at bales.com, and we would be able to set up time with our consultants to answer any questions you may have. Thanks again for joining, and enjoy the weekend. Have a good day.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard.